Hello, Finance for Life fans. My name is Arthur Vatal, and we are back with another episode of Finance for Life podcast. I started this podcast to help people gain financial knowledge and help people around the world grasp a better understanding of the financial field. Here with me today is Mr. Bhojwani, and he is an amazing entrepreneur and venture capitalist. He is the CEO of Asana Voices, which is a nonprofit organization that is an advocacy group building infrastructure to drive change for South Asians in North America. Not only is he a CEO, but he's also an amazing investor and is always helping small businesses grow. Before we begin, I would like to thank Mr. Bhojwani for being on this podcast and giving up his time and expertise. Now, I will pass it on to Mr. Bhojwani to introduce yourself and your field of work, and can you describe a little bit of what you do in that field?
Absolutely. First off, before I go ahead and start, Arthav, I want to say, insanely, I think it's insanely awesome what you've done. I got to watch a couple videos of your interviews, and not only you're natural with asking these questions, but I think a lot of folks are going to be learning a lot. I definitely did, from the folks that you interviewed, and I really appreciate you having me on as well.
Thank
So
you.
for your audience, I'm Prince Bhojwani, CEO of Asana Voices, as you said, but we'll keep that off to the side. I think the more relevant part of my life for the audience is what I do full time. So my background professionally was in tech. So when I graduated undergrad way back in 2013, I was involved in a lot of AI R&D and consulting and automation consulting and all of that for a couple of years. After a few years of that, ended up starting my own software business based around it was centered around AI without going too deep into it. Ran that for a couple of years, exited that, so essentially sold it in 2019, and then took that capital and I started what I do now primarily, which is called GrayWall. So GrayWall is my family office. Family office, for those who don't know, is essentially an asset management firm or private equity firm that's started to manage money for specific individuals or families. And our the way we operate is we've got two buckets. Our first bucket is our venture capital bucket, and our second one is our cash flow generating operations. The reason we have two buckets is venture capital, and we can go into this later in the interview, is you put money in and you won't see that money for 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years if you're lucky. And to make sure I can pay the bills and keep these lights on and feed myself, I need the cash flowing stuff, which I'll get into, and that makes sure that we have some sort of steady stream of income. A lot of that we dump into the venture capital stuff. Our VC thesis, VC is venture capital. This was back from 2019. Was our thought was there will be no foundational breakthroughs, period, without relying on secure intelligence. So what that means, I'll go into it. It's a lot of funky words. What that means is we've maxed out our biological computing power. Essentially, our brain has been tapped out, and we can no longer create huge breakthroughs with our brains alone. We're going to need to rely on, obviously, this new big buzzword that's everywhere now called AI.
Yeah.
But AI on its own means nothing. AI requires a lot of data, as you know, and so we invest in a lot of databases, any sort of infrastructure around data. Our bet was for every n gigabytes of data that you amass or you move back and forth over time, it's going to become more and more of a security risk. So you also need to invest in cybersecurity. So our approach in the venture space since 2019 has been essentially invest in AI, data, and cybersecurity. And we've been doing that for quite some time and have been very active. And then the rest of what we do for the cash flowing stuff is real estate. So hotels, land, things like that. M&A. So we broker a lot of deals, specifically the sports space. So a lot of the sports teams that you have probably heard of in the US, we've probably touched at some point, and we've helped investors get into. So that's what I do.
Yeah, no, that's all really amazing. I'm already intrigued by all of this. This is a really cool field to get into. I'm sure a lot of people watching would also be interested in this. And that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, you mentioned that you were originally, around tech and AI. So I kind of was wondering what really sparked your interest in joining this field and like how you switched from tech and then you switch your tech background to AI and also how you incorporated AI in this venture capitalist business.
Got it. So my tech background, I would say, was specifically in the space. So
Mhm.
going into GrayWall, it was a very natural transition for me because for me, I already understood the technical foundations, right? I
Yeah.
understood. I've you know architected models. I've written code. I've worked with the technical organizations. I understood all of that. I kind of figured out where I thought the industry was headed and where the world was headed. So I got that knowledge not only as an employee at my first job, but also as a founder, right, in that space. And so
Yeah.
the next thing, I had two paths. I could either start another company again, or I can take what I've gained and start investing in others. Um, and so that's really it. It was a very smooth transition. I would say, if I decided to invest in biotech or medical, that would be really far out there. But for
Yeah.
me, it was just, I was, and this is going to be a theme that I'm going to hit on probably for the rest of our conversation
Mhm.
is I tend to double down in areas that I understand where I think I have asymmetric um, knowledge or access to something. I would much rather double down in that field and bet the
Yeah.
farm on something like that, which is the only reason I got deeper and deeper into AI. I will
Yeah.
say we are probably exiting out of the AI space soon,
Mhm.
but that's how I got into AI.
Nice. That's all really cool. That's cool. It's aligned with your talents as well. So it was an easy transition. And so the next thing I wanted to ask was really what I've been wondering the most is when you invest into a startup, what do you look for before making the investment?
That's a really good question. Have you watched Star Wars before?
No.
You've never watched Star Wars, man. We got to
I
talk
know.
Star Wars.
Everyone makes fun of me for it.
In Star Wars, there's this thing called the Force, and the Force is this like unseen, you know, um, energy that attracts you to certain things.
Yeah.
And investing in start, and so it's much more like an art than it is a science. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Hmm.
And VC investing is, I would say, much more an art than it is a science. And the reason for that is depending on what stage of the business you're investing in, the idea can change, five times
Yeah.
before the business actually ends up doing whatever it needs to make money. Uh,
Yeah.
and so what we look at, and I'll give your audience, exactly where we invest. We invest in three stages primarily: the seed stage, the pre-seed stage, seed stage, and Series A. Pre-seed essentially means as close to the conceptual phase. So the idea is, let's say, Arthur, if you came to me and you're like, hey, Prince, I've got this idea for a business. You may have spent a month or two tinkering around with it. You may have like 10 users or customers, and you
Yeah.
come to me and that's still very early. It's not really a business yet,
Mhm.
so we're active in that stage. The seed stage is, if you'd come to me and you're like, hey, Prince, we've run this business for about 6 to 9 months now. We've got some sort of traction. We have some sort of idea where this is going. And the Series A is essentially where, hey, we've figured out where the product and market are fitting. We understand our customers now, and we really need substantial amount of capital to not
Mhm.
only formalize our company, but just really grow now that we figured out the model.
Yeah.
That's where we're most active. What we look for is first, um, obviously, the market and industry that it's in, how aligned to us and our thesis is it.
Mhm.
Uh, we generally are not interested in AI applications. So an AI application would be something like an Anthropic, an OpenAI, those types of things we have no interest in. I actually think most of those are going to get cut down in valuation in the next couple of years,
Yeah.
regardless of what we're seeing now. We're more interested in platform technology. So the picks and shovels that are being used for AI developers or security developers or database developers to be built on top of.
Mm.
So we look at the market and industry and see how aligned it is to our thesis. Number two is, and this is in no specific order, the founders. So the founders are super, super, super important. And I would say the earlier, remember I said pre-seed, seed, and Series A, the
Mhm.
closer it is to pre-seed, the more the founders matter, right? I would say at the pre-seed stage, the founder is probably 95% of our investment. The
Yeah.
reason for that is because the odds are the founder will have to pivot, which means they'll have to change their business model until they get that product market fit.
Hmm.
And so you're not really betting on that idea. You're really betting on the person that's executing on the idea at that point. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So the founder, and within the founder, what we're looking for is obviously operational expertise,
Hmm.
track record of anything, which means like, have they built a company before? Have they worked at a startup before? Have they sold anything before? Um, and then grit. Grit, I will say, if you have entrepreneurs that are looking for this or even investors, grit by far is the number one trait I have seen amongst all of my successful founders. Is like the difference between those who succeed and those who fail.
Yeah.
The founders that do well, they don't have to be the smartest, but
Hmm.
if they have the grit and perseverance to pivot 100 times and not stop at 99, and
Yeah.
the 100th is where success was, the founders that have the grit are the ones that will actually see the success.
Hmm.
And then what else do we look for? Obviously, business models and all this other boring
Yeah.
stuff, right? Like, does this all make sense? Um, that's a given. That's something that every investor is going to be looking for.
Hmm.
I would say market and industry, founder, and then all the nitty gritty, business details.
Yeah, I know. That's all very interesting. Obviously, if I were to invest in something, like even I do stocks. So if whenever I'm trying to invest in a stock, I look at the stock before, I look at the market capital, and I look at all that stuff and take it into consideration. But one thing I like that you mentioned was, looking at the founder and their personality too, because I feel like, if you look at someone and you can just kind of tell if they're like hardworking, if they have that drive inside of them. So if they really have that drive inside of them, like you said, that could really bring the company to a whole different level.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. And you've seen we've seen the story play out very recently. So I'll
Mhm.
pose a question to you, and then I will tell you who this person is and what they've built in the past.
Okay.
So an entrepreneur, very, well-known entrepreneur, spent maybe 6 to 10 years building this business and took it to pre-IPO or took it to IPO stage. And I think the company was worth between like 40 to 100 billion dollars by the time they were set to IPO. Some things happened, and this founder stepped away, or was separated, and went out and went to a venture capital firm for raising money for his next idea. If you were in that venture capital firm, is that a founder you would bet on?
I would say, yeah.
Okay, I would too. So this founder, his name was Adam Newman. Adam Newman was the founder of WeWork. Um, and WeWork obviously, has had, say a tumultuous path after, but
Mhm.
Adam Newman was able to raise an insane amount of money at the pre-seed stage, the idea stage,
Yeah.
simply because of who he was
Yeah.
for his next venture.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's all really interesting. Yeah, I know. Character, personality, those are all things that matter like a lot. It's a huge thing, like you said, especially in the pre-seed stage. And so that kind of leads me to what I was wondering next, which is, after all those experiences, after going through those stages, what are some of the best deals you've made, and what are things that like, that you've learned from them and that you've like changed in your strategy maybe after doing this multiple times?
I'll highlight um, I'll highlight uh, two two deals that we've done that we think are interesting. Both are in the AI and data space,
Mhm.
both in different stages. So the first one, we invested at the pre-seed stage, then the seed stage, then the Series A stage, and onwards. They're
Mhm.
now raising their subsequent financing. Um, the name of the company is Aikido Labs. Aikido Labs is based out of Los Angeles, California.
Mhm.
The founders of Aikido, we got connected back in 2018, 2019. They had started USC's Digital Health Lab. And within USC's Digital Health Lab, um, they had this idea, which was there are so many touch points within a civilian's day-to-day life. And I'll go through all of this. So what I mean by that is a civilian, such as you and I, we go to the doctor's office, the library, county office, hopefully not the police department, but maybe the police department, fire department, maybe the homeless shelter,
Yeah.
all things. And our data is being collected by all of these organizations. A lot of
Yeah.
these organizations are actually working within the umbrella of the government, but are not actually sharing the data with each other. There's a lot of red tape issues that are making it so that all this data is being siloed. And their thought was, well, if we were able to connect all of these siloed databases, wouldn't we have a better idea of what the civilian was actually like? And
Mhm.
so that's what they started doing. They went out and they built the largest data network across the US, and they unlocked data from hospital, all those places that I
Yeah.
mentioned, schools and whatnot. And they essentially were able to understand. They had a living, breathing, they had a pulse on everything that was going on with a person's life, because they were able to understand. They had so much more context to that person. What Aikido Labs was then able to do was they went to people like City of Santa Monica, for example, and they said, hey, you guys are spending the same amount of money per person in Santa Monica to prevent homelessness, which makes no sense because you and I both know Santa Monica has a lot of rich people. Those
Yeah.
rich people do not need those resources from the government to prevent them from going homeless. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And what Akito was able to do was tell the city, saying, hey, we know based off of these, what these people are doing throughout their life, that these are the civilians you should be giving most of your money to.
Mhm.
And they were able to, cut down or at least track at-risk homeless population years before they actually go homeless. And
Wow.
because of that, they were able to give them the resources that they would need to not become homeless. Fast
Dang.
forward a bit more, 2020 hits, obviously, because of COVID. The White House and CDC calls the Keto Labs because the Keto Labs has all this information of who's going to the hospitals, who's going to where can we start moving PPE and all this around. And now what they're doing is they're actually going out and buying hospitals and clinics themselves, and
Mhm.
they're putting them all on top of that data network that they've built. And
Mhm.
they released something called Scope AI. Scope AI is built on that data network, and Scope AI is essentially a clinician, that's powered by AI, and that clinician or physician is
Yeah.
out there actually prescribing medication, is helping with referrals, and is doing all of that. But it's because Aikido had built all of these steps out there. That's number one. Number two, we were an early investor in this company called CoreWeave. CoreWeave is you know a a massive infrastructure play in AI development. So if you think about um, how development works, typically you would build an application and upload it onto Amazon Web Services, so AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, one of these cloud services. The issue with AI models is that that is very compute intensive. And so that requires a new computing paradigm, which is called GPUs. I'm sure your audience has heard a lot of this, right?
Yeah.
The biggest player in GPUs, right, as of right now, is NVIDIA. And NVIDIA, even though they're selling their chips to the AWSs and Googles and Microsofts, they don't want to be, you know, they don't want to sell their chips to Amazon and then Amazon essentially control how developers are interfacing with those chips. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
they could throttle it or introduce bottlenecks, and people wouldn't be happy with NVIDIA then. So this company called CoreWeave started working with NVIDIA very early on, this is years ago. And NVIDIA saw this as a very strategic play and said, hey, we're going to give CoreWeave all of our chips first. CoreWeave is going to start building out these data centers and cloud network for AI developers. And they will have access to our chips first, not all these other players. And when we were investing in them, AI was really taking off.
Hmm.
This was we had done the least number of deals that year because of how hot the market had become.
Yeah.
And when we saw it, we did the math, and I can be a little bit more open now because this was the past. We invested at a $7 billion valuation.
Wow.
We did the math and we said if CoreWeave sells all of the GPUs it owns, it
Hmm.
pays off its debt, and it services all the contracts that it's lined up, it will be able, and it doesn't do any additional sales, it should be able to bring in $7 billion in cash to shareholders. So
Wow.
for us, we said this is literally the cheapest way on planet Earth to play AI,
Yeah.
because PE multiples, right? Price earning multiples,
Mhm.
go really high, especially in a very hot market. But for something like this, there was really no PE multiple, right?
Yeah.
There was nothing. There's no premium on CoreWeave. So, we invested a decent amount, and now CoreWeave is worth about, less than 9 months later, it's worth about $30 billion.
Wow.
And it's because people realize that, hey, NVIDIA is selling all these GPUs to someone. Who are they selling it to? They're selling it
Yeah.
to CoreWeave. So, yeah, those are two
Well, yeah.
deals.
That's all really interesting. I'm getting interested into this. And, I bet it's also good for you guys when, you invested in CoreWeave and it's like, damn, like, they've really grown that much. So I bet you guys feel accomplished too, right?
Uh, you know, our there's two things.
Mm.
They're paper gains, right?
Yeah.
We haven't sold anything, and so they're still there. We're happy that the company is not dying and it's not flapping around. But
Yeah.
we generally have a rule to, and the saying is, no cigar until the money's in the bank, right? So
Yeah.
no celebration until we've actually sold anything.
Yeah.
Uh, but we're happy. We're incredibly happy. I think we're right on our thesis. I
Hmm.
think the AI bet was great. I think the security bet was great. The data bet was great. I think
Yeah.
security is going to be much bigger than people think now. Uh, so we're pretty happy overall.
Yeah, I know. That's amazing. So kind of related to that, you talked about two really good decisions, good deals, but I was wondering what percent of your portfolio companies typically succeed and how do you handle like, I guess, underperforming investments?
That's a good question. So, I will say with certain companies, depending on how early they are, like if it's pre-seed, seed, and we
Mhm.
can do something to help them. I'll talk about the ones that are hurting at the moment. We'll
Yeah.
sit down and we'll say, hey, look, um, do you need help with sales and marketing? Do you need help? Do you need me to email people? Do you need me to connect you to people? Do you
Hmm.
need help financing? If if it makes sense. If the founder has no interest in doing that, if the company is no, if the we have to be very, brutal when it comes to just, hey, this
Yeah.
is not going to work out. If
Yeah.
it's not going to work out, we got to pull the plug ASAP.
Yeah.
Um, I would say that happens at least 50 to 75% of the time.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I would say 50 to 75%, companies go south. Um, and then the next bulk, you'll end up being even, or like you'll make a decent amount, but if you net it out, you could have put your money in the S&P and it would be the same.
Yeah.
But then there will be that like remaining 10% or 10-15% of the companies that you invest in that 20x
Yeah.
or
Wow.
30x. And you're just like, whew, I'm so glad I invested in you guys. So um, yeah, I would say you really, you really want to minimize the number of losers you've got in the portfolio. And
Mhm.
it's very hard to do because again, it's much more of an art than it is a science. There's no
Yeah.
way any VC investor knows which
Yeah.
one's gonna hit, which one's not, you know. Uh, but you want to, based off of everything and the
Mhm.
decisions you make and the way you structure the deal, you minimize how many losses you take and you maximize and you keep doubling down on the winners, right?
Yeah.
Like the Keto Labs, we kept doubling down, double down, double down. We
Yeah.
just kept growing. So, yeah.
One thing I wanted to say was, what was I gonna say? If someone wants to be a VC, so like pretend I was a high schooler or I just went into college and I was interested in being a VC, what do you think they should be like, thinking about, or what do you think they should be doing?
It's really interesting, Arthur, and I do want to preface by saying that I don't have a traditional VC route, route into VC. But what I would imagine, and from the people that we work with who have taken the traditional route,
Mhm.
uh, the folks who do the best, in my opinion, are the ones who are hyper focused on a handful of verticals, right? So if you are interested in biotech, or if you're interested in robotics or space, really, really, really understand that space, no pun intended, inside and out. Um, and network with people, network with founders, network with researchers, network with investors. Um, and then work at a startup or find your own startup, because when you're investing in a startup, you're not investing, you're not buying stock the way you and I do in Nvidia or Apple or Google, and we don't know who these people are. We're just, we click buy and we put in, 100 shares, click buy. It's not
Yeah.
like that when you invest in a startup. But startup, you've got founders, you've got a team, you're building something. It's a very volatile environment.
Mhm.
You need to really understand what it's like for the founders and their team through these ups and downs,
Yeah.
because as an investor you really want to empathize with that journey as well, because if you, in my opinion, are not a investor that's founder aligned, the word is going to get around very quickly, and nobody's going to, even if you've got all the money in the world, people are not going to accept your money because they know that you're not someone that founders typically have fun with, or typically want to get on a phone call with, you know
Yeah.
so I would say those are the steps. I would say really hone in on a few spaces, network with everybody from researchers to investors to founders, work out a startup yourself so you understand it, maybe
Mhm.
even start one yourself, and then go from there.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I feel, yeah, I agree. Like working up at a startup, that can really help you, I guess, understand other startups as well. Because once you know the ins and outs and you do your own startup, you can figure out maybe what they're dealing with, or maybe problems that they have, or things that they're doing good. So it can help you with your own research as well. And that takes me to my last question, which is, it's kind of general, more for like the audience, just as a last like closing question is, what is one piece of advice you would give everyone watching on how to, handle the money wisely?
Okay. Well, for regulatory sakes, I'm not a financial advisor, so this
Yeah.
is not financial advice. Please consult, whoever you talk to. I would say I want to give two pieces of advice, if that's okay. One is pretty general, and I would say investments are a function of time and risk.
Yeah.
If you are young, like I'm assuming the people who are listening to this or watching this are around your age.
Mhm.
Uh, and, hopefully there's a lot of time in their horizon. It's always better to start investing whatever you can at an early age, because the compounding effect is insane over time.
Mhm.
Uh, when you think of someone like Warren Buffett, the biggest asset for him was his health. Him being a white man, being born where he was, and access to information, just right place, right time. But investing that over time is what really made Warren, you know. So I would say that, because if you want to make the same amount of money but you have less time, then you end up having to take more risk, and that can
Mhm.
go south.
Yeah.
So always remember that investments are a function of time and risk, and if time is on your side, you really want to get into the investing game.
Mhm.
And then number two, for those who are interested more on the VC side, I would say don't be a generalist. Don't be someone who's investing in consumer stuff and food and bio and robotics and defense companies and AI. I am always against those. I think those who are generalists aren't actually that smart. I think you really want to figure out a very niche thesis and
Yeah.
understand, because realistically, people, unless you're like, 0.001% in IQ, you're going to be able to know everything. But the odds are most people are not intelligent enough to know all of these industries. And it's
Yeah.
better to know maybe one or two, know them inside and out, and
Yeah.
bet everything on that industry, because likely going to have that asymmetric upside because you understand that space.
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, that's great advice. One thing I liked was, how you said time. Time, I feel like is really important, especially when investing, because even when I was younger, the first thing I would think of is like, what if I just invest all my money in the stock, wait for it to go up one day, and then take it all out, right? So one thing that I learned doing stocks over and over again is, like S&P 500, it's estimated to go up about 10% per year. So if you just put in like maybe $10,000 right now, you can make millions by the time you're like 70, 60. So
Yep.
that's why, time, again, like you said, compounded interest, that's really like your best friend, especially when doing investments.
Yep.
So that does bring this podcast to a close. And first of all, I would just like to thank you, Mr. Bhojwani, for your valuable time and sharing your knowledge. I myself learned so much from this podcast, so I can't imagine how much this would help all the viewers, especially like around the world, just the viewers watching. And especially one thing I really liked when you said was when you were talking about venture capitalists, the pre-seed, seed, and what was the last one?
Series A.
Series A, yeah. The three stages, I really like that. Pre-seed was early, then mid, and then late stage, and how you talked about grit and hard work. And that was all really amazing to learn about, amazing to hear. And this will definitely help out my podcast and all the people willing to gain literacy in the financial world. So I really appreciate everything. I hope you guys have learned a lot from this podcast. And yeah, once again, I would just like to thank you for sharing all this information.
Thanks a lot, Arthur. You did a great job. This is great stuff you're doing.
Thank you so much. See you later.